We are cleaner than they remember. The council chamber smelled of varnish and old victory. Light moved over polished insignia over the slow faces of the sovereign conclave. They watched a holobox where a single human explorer rotated in a containment, latter small pink, insistently alive. The archivist laughed once. "Relic stock," she said. The word fluttered like a mote across the room and landed in the throat of an old admiral. He tasted it and found it true. "This unit is an anomaly," the clerk reported. Data flashed. Transponder ping at 0.0033 cycles. Biological markers flagged as primitive. Processing queue. 1. The protocol read 47 lines of neat, patient cruelty. They had made rituals of this. Decisions moved through the conclave like a tide, slow, ceremonious, pure. They loved their slowness. It proved civility. Where other polities lashed and burned, the conclave processed, catalogued, re-logged it. Anomalies were assessed, re-educated. Integrated deviation did not require fire. It required paperwork and time. That time felt like righteousness here. The chamber sealed itself in a calculus of rightness. A student of this empire might have noticed the little contempt beneath those rituals. The archivist tapped a data bar and brought up the explorer's footage. The human blinked. "They call themselves many names," the archivist hummed. "They make noise. They strike. They are loud like storms. And storms are predictable." As you scrolled, a finger and a title line appeared. "Relics discard." The smile that followed was small and sharp. "Authorized processing," the head murmured. His voice was a blade wrapped in silk. The ledger accepted the notation. Servitors warmed. The containment lattice tightened its fields by a fraction. The human's heartbeat registered as 0.2 Hz on a remote sensor. And that number felt absolute to them, an assurance of finitude. "Do not waste resources on relics," the head said. "We redirect them to purpose." Outside, the ritual fleet eased their formation into the orbital hull. Hundreds of sails, the camera feed labeled each. Vanguard 241, Hushwing 72, Ordain 6. The conclave did not tally ships the way Terrans did. They counted ceremonial cycles and rites. Still, the numbers showed in the margins more counters for comfort. They had time, they had order, they had the right to read themselves as merciful. "Let it be known," intoned the Chancellor in that dry cadence that crushed dissent before it began. "This specimen will be processed under code Amnit-11. In a fortnight the Council will attend the public real." Loose in there was applause. It was slow and tastefully measured. "We will not be rushed," someone asked softly. "What of the Terran response?" "Their myths speak of savage reprisal." The head's fingers hovered. He shrugged the shadow of a hand. "They have, at best, 67 corvettes within a 2-day muster radius. At worst, tailies. Our channels report no standing doctrine beyond bluster." Another small laugh. The archivist closed the explorer footage. "We will not be hurried." The holobox dimmed. The human's eyes tracked the dimming with steady curiosity. In the chamber, that human became a line item, and then a lesson. They wrote the justification. They wrote the ritual prayers. They logged the hours. In that slow, clean accounting, they called themselves humane. They did not hear the signal that crossed systems the way a bell rings no clamor, only a precise notation of movement. The clerk did not know it yet, but another ledger was opening. Somewhere else, slim and brutal, and it would use numbers no ceremony could sanctify. The clerk would continue to tally rights while fleets elsewhere plotted counters measured in minutes, not months. "They are relics," the archivist repeated to herself, and smiled. "We come for our own." The alert rippled through Terran command like a single inhalation held across continents. One explorer, designation Hale 47, missing from scheduled check-in by 0.9 hours. A conclave lattice signature encircled the last ping. No message, no negotiation, only the quiet certainty of seizure. In the war room, no one raised their voice. They did not need to. Reciprocity doctrine, activated at 3:12 UTC. The room acknowledged it with a soft shift of light. A sick recovery authorized full theater mobilization. The old dictum echoed through every console. Any strike on one human invokes all of us. It was not anger, it was arithmetic. Door Fleet Marshal Serene reviewed the numbers. 67 ships already within accelerated muster lines. Wolves of varying hull, Mass 6 dread carriers, 9 shock cruisers, a phalanx of corvettes whose drives could burn 12 grams without complaint. Less than 0.2% of the Terran total. More than enough. She slid her finger across the display, stitching them into a single operational silhouette. Their formation pulsed once, accepting the call. Do we attempt parley first? The adjutant asked. We state intent, Saren replied, not request. Her voice stayed even, almost gentle. Strength without spectacle. They processed one of ours. We retrieved them. We closed the ledger. The adjutant nodded. Orders cascaded outward. In 0.4 seconds, touching ship mines, carriers, the cold geometry of prepositioned refuel cradles. Every node responded with the same two-word confirmation. Wolves inbound. A punchline stinger flickered across the tactical holler. We answer as one dot in orbit above Luna. The first wave tilted into alignment. Their hulls carried no decoration. Only the serialized marks of service and a single clause etched beneath. We end what harms us. Below them, civilian channels remained untouched. Cities slept. Terran retaliation never reached for the innocent. The mercy was deliberate and visible. Inside the flagship Vigilance, Saren monitored the probability fields. The Conclave's slow rituals had created a gap wide enough for precision, narrow enough for urgency. Eta to intercept window, she asked. 15 minutes at 12 grams sustained, replied the ship mind. Margin of error 0.02%. Acceptable. A second stinger marked the tempo. 67 for 1. Engine arrays brightened across the fleet. The acceleration profiles converged, tight as a fist. These maneuvers had been rehearsed for decades, though rarely used. Not because Terrans hesitated, but because almost no one provoked them. Saren traced the vector of the Conclave's orbital. Pattern ornate, ceremonial, vulnerable. They assumed time was safety. They assumed distance was insulation. They assumed humans negotiated before moving. She looked at the empty chair reserved for Hale 47's return. The restraint in her eyes was not softness. It was principle. Transmit notice, she said. Reciprocity enacted. We are recovering our citizen. Stand down or be removed. The message departed at light speed, a clean thread through the dark. Sir watched a fleet angled toward burn initiation, synchronized to the microsecond. No fanfare, no threat display, only purpose sharpened to a single edge. The wolves moved, they fired first. Certain we would break. The Conclave vanguard formed its ritual crescent, sails glinting as though ceremony could shape physics. Their commanders logged the approach of 67 Terran hulls as an anomaly rather than a threat. In their doctrine, numbers held meaning only when adorned with rites. Terrans brought only intention. At 480,000 kilometers, the Conclave issued a formal warning. At 470,000 kilometers, they opened fire. Energy lances clawed across vacuum 12 primary beams, 34 secondaries, each tuned to fracture composite armor. The assault struck the Terran line in a ripple of blinding white. Conclave observers leaned forward to witness the collapse. It never came. Telemetry returned to Clin. Figure 92% dissipation across human ablative fields. The beams died as though swallowed by a calm sea. The remaining 8% scattered into harmless thermal bloom. Conclave monitors flagged the anomaly, then flagged it again, then fell into a silence their protocols had no words for. One admiral whispered, "Impossible," inside. The vigilant Marshal Serene watched the energy graphs flatten. Status, nominal, replied the shipmind. Shield drop, 0.3%. No casualties. Conclave channels began to fracture. Officers demanded explanations. Analysts replayed the impact frames at 0.01x speed, searching for fracture lines that did not exist. They had spent centuries refining ceremonial fire broad, radiant, symbolic. Terran defenses had been engineered for impact mathematics, not displayed when culture worshipped spectacle. The other measured survival, a punchline, stinger, cut through Saren's bridge. Your fire changes nothing. The Terran formation maintained course, untouched. No deviation, no urgency. Their silence became its own message. The Conclave tried again. 6 concentrated beams meant to shear a cruiser in half. They vanished into the same ablative calm. Panic took a new shape, the shape of realization. Their weapons, designed to terrify, could not make Terrans bleed. Saren lifted a brow. They expected retreat. They expected compliance. The shipmind corrected. Beneath a veneer of Terran calm lay restraint. Reciprocity doctrine authorized overwhelming retribution, but never indiscriminate harm. Seren held her fire, giving the conclave 3 full seconds to reconsider a mercy measure. Deliberate, unmistakable. The conclave misread it as hesitation. Advance lances, a distant commander barked. Press the relics until they fracture. Seren watched the heat maps brighten. Record everything, she said quietly. They will need these moments explained at their trials. The fleet continued its slow, implacable glide through the failing storm. No maneuver corrections. No evasive shifts. Just the confidence of physics on their side. A second stinger flared across the tactical feed. We do not break. Conclave vessels began transmitting confused, almost pleading queries across their internal network. How do they negate us? What have we awakened? How do relics endure direct lance saturation? Seren offered no reply. She simply nodded to the next waypoint, letting momentum carry the wolves closer by the kilometer. The first reversal had landed. Their fire had meant to humble. Instead, it revealed the truth. And now their shock was the silence the fleet moved through as it closed the distance. They thought distance would save them. The conclave regrouped along their ceremonial axis. Sails unfurled in solemn arcs meant to signal control. Their doctrine taught that space itself bowed to ritual, that enemies slowed before grandeur, that velocity yielded to tradition. But tradition had no counter for a fleet built on precision and ruthless unity. Marshal Serene gave the order. 12G burns ignited across all 67 Terran hulls in the same tenth of a second. No flourish, no countdown, just synchronized acceleration that warped the tactical map into a tightening spear point. Distance collapsed in clean increments 40,000 kilometers, 30,000, 22,000 each, updated with machine-perfect cadence. Conclave watchers stared at vectors that disobeyed every assumption they held about human limitations. Their breath caught as the wolves shifted theaters. Mid-dash burn dart, a trio of cruisers peeled into a lateral arc, intercepting a conclave flanking wing, with timing measured in microseconds. 4 corvettes dove beneath the orbital plane to cut off escape routes the conclave had not yet declared. Not a single Terran ship broke formation. Not a single drive wavered. The fleet moved like a single organism, one that had trained not for spectacle but for inevitability. A punchline stinger flashed across Seren's HUD. Speed is judgment. Inside conclave command. Ritualists scrambled to adapt their choreography. They attempted to initiate Cycle 3 posture, a defensive pattern requiring 8 minutes of aligned chanting and process. They managed 18 seconds before the predictive models failed. Terran acceleration had shredded the timing windows. Their rituals could not keep pace with physics, and panic broke the silence their culture prized. Unacceptable, a high priest hissed. Their bodies should rupture at 12 grams. They compensate, an aide whispered. Augments, dampers, something. Seren heard none of it, but her fleet demonstrated the truth. Internal gravities held steady at 1.03 grams. Medical strain negligible. Telemetry stable. The ship mind chimed each checkpoint with the same serene report. Formation integrity at 99.8%. Continue. The wolves closed another 10,000 kilometers. Conclave captains, abandoning rights, ordered evasive spreads. But spreads required coordination, and coordination required hierarchy, and hierarchy required time. Terrans stole their time with every burn. A dozen conclave ships stumbled into collision courses with their own escorts, forced into erratic vectors they were never trained to execute. The gulf narrowed to 8,000 kilometers. A second stinger cut through the bridge. Your rituals cannot hold. Serene watched the conclave's formation unravel into frantic clusters. She saw hesitation bloom where arrogance once sat. Maintain minimal fire, she ordered. They still have the opportunity to disengage. Mercy, even at 12 grams, remained policy. Conclave channels briefly lit with pleas for direction. No answer. Kami, their slow councils, hours away from convening, still debated posture while the battlefield compressed around them. Terran ships rode their acceleration profiles with unwavering calm. Each step a lesson in operational superiority. 6,000 kilometers, 4,200 kilometers. The conclave finally understood that distance was no shield, and ritual no armor. Their commanders began broadcasting unilateral retreat, intentions too late, too scattered, Too slow. Saren let the fleet settle into its final convergence vector. Not a chase, not a frenzy. Just the quiet approach of a certainty they could no longer deny. The wolves had arrived within striking range, and nothing in the Conclave's long, ornate history had prepared them for the moment. Distance ceased to matter. Dawn came as a line of metal at 4,800 kilometers. The Terran fleet halted its advance with a precision that felt like contempt. Conclave vessels drifted in fractured clusters, still attempting to reassemble ceremonial lines. Their commanders prayed that any distance might yet buffer them from what moved toward them. Marshal Saren gave the second quiet order of the operation: prepare rail batteries. Across 67 hulls, magnetic spines awakened, capacitors hummed. Kinetic slugs, each massed for deep void penetration, locked into their rails. No glow, no grand flourish, just the low, clean promise of physics perfected. The Conclave registered the preparations. Too late. Terrans are charging radiant beams. One analyst cried. No, an admiral corrected, watching the telemetry harden into fatal clarity. Not beams. The first volley fired. Each slug left its rail at a silent fraction of light speed, so fast the sensors tagged only distortion cones. The Conclave Vanguard 12 ships arranged in a half-formed crescent never completed their defensive posture. Impacts ripped through them in neat, surgical line. Holes parted like paper. Drives sheared. Compartments vented. Ritual sails shredded into glittering debris. Orbital dominance clock started. 0 hours 0 minutes and 1 second. A punchline stinger flashed across Saren's display. Kinetics end what arrogance begins. Volley 2 struck before the Conclave's surviving captains registered. The first 8 more ships folded inward as their structural lattice failed. The debris cloud grew bright enough to register as a temporary star against the night. Dominance clock. 0 hours 0 minutes and 17 seconds. Inside the Vigilant, no celebration stirred. Serene only tracked the vector math and the escape attempts weaving too slowly through. The chaos aimed to disable where possible, she instructed. They are combatants, not targets, her gunnery chief acknowledged with precise calibration shifts. Several rail batteries retuned for joint strike severance rather than hull core annihilation. Mercy rendered through engineering. Dominance clock. 0 hours 0 minutes and 26 seconds. The Conclave attempted a synchronized counter. 6 ships firing overlapping lancers in desperation. The beams splashed uselessly against ablative fields, the same 92% dissipation mocking their final effort. Their tactical net began to scream with contradiction. Retreat now. Hold formation. Complete Cycle 5 rights. Survive. Nothing aligned. Saren lined up the final sequence. 3 ships, breaking clear on Vector Gamma, the shipmind reported. Recommend interdiction. Disable drives only, she replied. 3 slugs answered. 3 drives died. 3 crippled ships drifted, intact, enough for survivors to be recovered later. It was a lesson delivered without malice. Dominance clock. 0 hours 0 minutes and 41 seconds. Silence rolled outward. The Conclave's vanguard, an entire ceremonial wing, had ceased to exist as an organized force. Terran hulls glided through the wreckage without altering speed, their formation unbroken, their purpose unchanged. The battlefield belonged to them now, not by fury, but by precision. A second stinger cut the space between breaths. 41 seconds. Orbit hours. Saren examined the last pockets of resistance. Scattered, directionless, terrified. Nothing remained. That met the definition of coordinated threat. Mark combat zone secure, she said. The fleet shifted to recovery posture, rail batteries cooling as smoothly as they had fired. Mercy followed Dominance with the same inevitability. Ahead. The next system awaited, its defenses still bound to ritual time. The wolves advanced, the Nadar opened before them. Justice speaks before the next shot. The Terran fleet entered the Conclave's second system at controlled speed, rail batteries silent, drives calibrated for minimum collateral. Marshal Serene ordered the broadcast on all open channels. No threat, no ultimatum, only a statement delivered with the calm weight of law. This is Terran command. One of ours was taken, we have come to retrieve them. We hold no quarrel with civilians. Evacuation corridors are open. Stand clear of military nodes, and you will not be harmed. The message repeated in 47 dialects. Its restraint cut deeper than any weapon. Conclave populations conditioned to expect fury from relics now faced something colder, disciplined justice. Refugee signatures bloomed across the orbital bands as Terran escorts guided transports through safe lanes. Every vector monitored with deliberate care. A punchline stinger flickered through the system feed. We do not punish the innocent. Behind diplomacy, the operation's harder edge unfolded. 3 conclave systems hosted the processing complexes used for forced integration. Structures built to erase identities with clinical efficiency under reciprocity doctrine, these sites qualified as strategic tyranny engines. They would not survive the hour. At H+07 minutes, the first complex fell. Terran strike teams disabled orbital defenses with precision bursts, each one calculated to prevent debris scattered toward civilian zones. Then the sterilization beams swept across the facility's hardened core. The structure collapsed into clean, incandescent ruin, no lingering firestorms, no atmospheric contamination. A tyranny ended in a single exhale of light at H+23 minutes. The second system followed. Here, Conclave commanders attempted to shield the complex with conscripted laborcraft. Seren's jaw tightened. "Redirect fire," she ordered. "No strike passes until every non-combatant is clear." Escorts swooped in, towing the vulnerable ships aside with magnetic tethers. Only when the evacuation corridor red-green did the beams fire, another engine of coercion died, leaving its captives freed but shaken. A second stinger pulsed across tactical overlays. Justice is precision. The third system proved the most fortified. Ritual fleets clustered around the processing towers, chanting intercoms as though words could stave off physics. They fired first. They died first. Rail cannon fire tuned to disable rather than annihilate ripped through their defensive ring. Drives ruptured. Weapons darkened. No kill shots unless absolutely required. Once the perimeter failed, the sterilization began. Clean. Controlled. Final. H60 minutes. 3 systems neutralized. 0 civilian casualties. Conclave High Command, scattered and reeling, finally broke. Its silence. Messages arrived in panicked fragments. How do you restrain yourselves? Why spare those who serve us? Why draw such clear lines between guilt and innocence? Seren offered no triumph, only clarity. We answer harm with proportion to the guilty alone. That is our measure. As the last complex faded into cooling dust, Terran medbays received the first waves of liberated captives, trembling, silent. They were given warmth, water, names restored where they could be found. The work proceeded without judgment. In the quiet after the first hour, the fleet aligned for the next vector. Justice had been delivered, but the operation was not yet complete. One human remained unreturned, and until they stood among their own again, the wolves would not rest. Preparation began long before the first shot. While conclave councils assembled, their slow spirals of debate, Terran Command had already unfolded 3 predictive theaters across the stars. The wolves did not wait for provocation to learn their enemies. They studied, modeled, calculated the places where tyranny rooted itself. Deepest reciprocity doctrine was not improvisation. It was an architecture waiting for a trigger. Marshal Seren reviewed the lattice of forecasts as the fleet advanced toward the next system. Each line of light represented a scenario run 1,000 times over. Conclave retreat patterns, ritual fleet deployments, political delay cycles, vulnerability gaps in their ceremonial defenses. Nothing about the enemy surprised her. Only the timing had been uncertain. A ship mind chimed softly. Predictive model Delta 9 has reached 98.7% confirmation. Display. The map expanded into a tri-system overlay, highlighting every council, chamber, fleet dock, and processing relay still capable of directing resistance. Serene saw the same flaw repeated across them, reliance on deliberation, not adaptation. Their governance moved at the pace of incense smoke. The wolves moved at the pace of need. A punchline stinger glimmered across her internal HUD. We were already here, in the Conclave's high chamber. I was behind real time. Leaders argued about response sequences. Reports arrived faster than they could interpret them. Vanguard lost. Processing complexes gone. Evacuation corridors opened by the enemy. Terrans not slaughtering civilians. Terrans advancing anyway. Their worldview had no doctrine for an opponent who combined overwhelming force with strict moral boundaries. They understood brutality, they understood mercy, but precision mercy, that rattled the pillars of their empire. Meanwhile, Terran predictive teams had already positioned interdiction wings along every logical conclave, retreat vector. 5 shock cruisers rode silent above a dark gas reef, ready to intercept a ceremonial fleet that would not depart for another 26 minutes. A carrier group drifted beyond the system's dust edge, pre-lined to cut off reinforcements, still awaiting council approval to launch. Everywhere the conclave imagined future safety, the wolves had traced a line through it. Saren updated the command net. Phase 3 posture begins on my mark. Maintain non-combatant priority. Any surrender signal is accepted without condition. Her officers acknowledged without hesitation. They knew the weight of the next hours crush tyranny's capacity to act, but leave its civilians able to breathe. A second stinger slid across the fleet-wide feed. Your delay is our weapon. In the conclave's comms archive, panic deepened. Sub pleaded for permission to regroup. High priests demanded ritual coherence. Advisors insisted new councils must convene before declaring war. No decision emerged. Every path required time, and time belonged to the wolves. Terran interceptors struck before the conclave fleets finished mustering. Drives were disabled with pinpoint kinetic taps. Command ships found their arrays sheared in clean, bloodless. Ark's entire flotillas drifted intact enough to survive. Powerless to intervene, Saren watched it happen with measured calm. They will understand soon, she said. This was never retaliation alone. It was inevitability. The predictive lattice dimmed as one final model resolved. The last system between her and the captive human. The wolves had prepared every step. Now they would finish the path they had already mapped. Judgment began in silence. The Terran fleet emerged from slip into the conclave's central supply corridor rings, 27 refueling spires, and a chain of fortified moons arranged to feed their war machine. It was meant to be unreachable, shielded by doctrine and distance. But doctrine had already failed them, and distance had already died. Marshal Sir raised her hand, 12G strike pattern, all vectors. The wolves answered as one. Acceleration flared across 67 holes, turning the battle space into converging lines of inevitability. Terran ships burned at full thrust. Each maneuver plotted against supply arteries the conclave believed eternal. Support stations crumpled under sheer kinetic approach, no fire needed. Only velocity and intention. A punchline stinger cut through the fleet net. Speed erases empires. Conclave commanders tried to respond. They ordered Cycle 6 fortification rites, demanded the alignment of ritual sails, attempted to summon fleets that had already been disabled in preceding systems. Their orders stumbled through fractured comms. Nothing reached the units fast enough. The first supply ring fell at H+03 minutes. Terran interceptors skimmed its equatorial plane, severing cargo conduits with precision rail bursts. Workers fled along luminous corridors. Escorts escorted them, redirecting evacuation pods into safe vectors. No civilian was fired upon, not once. The second ring collapsed at H+07 minutes, its defense tower gutted by a single Driv-D shot. Conclave captains, unaccustomed to an enemy who stole capability rather than life, froze in disbelief by H+11 minutes. The corridor's primary fuel artery ruptured. Not violently, Terran gunners had calibrated the strike to vent pressure, rather than ignite it. 1,000 kilometers of infrastructure dimmed like a candle blown out, across 16 inhabited worlds in the region. Leadership councils watched the data feeds with dawning horror. They saw an enemy who could obliterate them in seconds. Choosing not to, they saw power without cruelty, justice without indulgence. Territorial illusions shattered. One by one, their broadcasts arrived. The first planet's message shook. We cannot resist. We surrender to Terran terms. Please ensure safe passage for our civilians. The second followed, then a third. Then a chain reaction of capitulations across the corridor, 16 planets in total, each acknowledging the same truth. The wolves were not conquerors. They were here for one of their own, and nothing more. A second stinger pulsed across the tactical overlay. 16 worlds yield to restraint. Inside the conclave's distant high chamber, chaos finally eclipsed ceremony. Advisors shouted for unified defense. Priests insisted surrender was heresy. Generals begged for a coordinated retreat. None agreed. None acted. The Empire's machinery had fractured under its own weight. Saren read each surrender in silence, logging them with quiet precision. Accept all. Route humanitarian support to Systems 3, 5, and 11. They're under us, Orst acknowledged. The shipmind replied. With every surrendered world, resistance thinned. With every broken supply line, the Conclave's ability to project force dissolved. Not by massacre, by inevitability. Saren studied the final Vector 1 system remained between her fleet and the captive human. The path was open. The wolves had carved it clean. Form up, she said. The engines dimmed from burn to steady glide. Judgment had been delivered. Recovery was next. Mercy arrived where fury was expected. Terran strike teams breached the last defended citadel without firing a single lethal round. 9 Conclave admirals, architects of the processing protocols, sat stunned in their ceremonial armor as containment fields folded around them. No cruelty, no spectacle, just the clean precision of arrest. Marshal Serene opened the system-wide channel. This is Terran Command. The individuals before you stand accused of enforced integration, unlawful detention, and the seizure of our citizen. Their trials begin now. All proceedings are open. All evidence will be shown. Conclave populations, braced for slaughter, found instead a tribunal. The 9 admirals stood on a circular dais beneath neutral light, no shadows to hide in, no scripts to recite. Their titles held no weight here. The charges played in concise bursts, records of processing orders, routing logs, captured internal memos that spoke of relic stock and efficient reallocation. A punchline stinger flashed across the broadcast. Justice does not fear witnesses. One admiral tried to invoke ritual immunity. Saren met the attempt with steady tone. Your rights are not our law. You will be heard. You will not be harmed. The shock that rippled through Conclave networks was greater than that caused by any kinetic strike. They had prepared for punishment. They had not prepared for fairness. Evidence continued. Testimony from liberated captives. Sensor logs from seized processing towers. Communications where 2 admirals debated whether the human explorer's fear response might provide useful behavioral mapping. The fleet remained silent as the admirals spoke in their defense and defiant. Some trembling, some suddenly aware of the machinery of cruelty they had helped maintain. Saren offered no contempt, only clarity. Understanding is not absolution, she said. But it is allowed. The verdicts were delivered with the same restraint. Guilty on all counts. Sentences. Indefinite demilitarized confinement under Terran oversight. Full rights of survival, humane treatment guaranteed. A second stinger crossed the net. We do not kill the helpless. Then came the moment that shifted the entire cost of the campaign. Deep within the Citadel's lower vaults, a Terran rescue team located an isolation chamber shielded from orbit. Inside, barely conscious, lay alive, malnourished, but alive. Their heartbeat registered at 42 BPM, rising as Terran medics lifted them onto a stretcher and fed warming gel through cracked lips. When the recovery feed appeared on the open channel, millions across space fell silent. No threats, no gloating, only a quiet truth. The wolves had crossed systems, shattered fleets, and dismantled tyranny for one life they refused to forfeit. Saren knelt beside the stretcher as Hale 47's eyes opened. You're safe, she said, her voice steady as gravity. We're taking you home. The message echoed through every listening world, not a warning, but a promise. Mercy after dominance, justice without hate. Strength bound to purpose, the fleet reformed around the survivors' medevac shuttle. Engines dimming into formation. Ahead waited the horizon they had not yet seen. Mercy entered the system as quietly as a breath. Terran breach. Teams moved through the final Conclave command citadel with measured steps, weapons tuned to non-lethal arcs. 9 admirals, keepers of the processing doctrine. Authors of the order that seized Hale 47 found themselves encircled by containment fields before they could finish their ritual invocations. No blows. No shouting. Just the inevitability of rest. Marshal Serene activated the open channel link. This is Terran Command. The individuals detained are responsible for unlawful captivity, enforced integration protocols, and the seizure of our citizen. Their trials will be conducted now. All systems may witness. The statement alone fractured the Conclave's expectations. They had braced for execution. Instead, they received transparency. The dais brightened. The 9 admirals stood under neutral luminance, stripped of ceremonial authority. Evidence played in crystalline bursts, A2 pads authorizing processing, efficiency directives, comms discussing relic compliance cycles. Sensor logs showing the precise moment Hail 47 was taken. Every word, every timeline, every signature laid bare, a punchline stinger washed across the broadcast. Truth stands without fear. One admiral attempted ritual immunity, citing ancestral decree. Serene answered without heat. Your rights cannot shield you from the consequences of harm. You will speak. You will not be harmed. The restraint struck harder than any threat. Conclave citizens sent millions of queries across public nets, trying to understand justice without blood. Testimony followed, rescued captives describing memory-stripping protocols, Terran specialists explaining the ethics violations embedded in each conclave process. Some admirals defended their traditions. Others faltered. A few lowered their eyes as if seeing their own doctrine clearly for the first time. The verdict arrived with the same calm as the charges: guilty. Sentences: long-term confinement under Terran oversight, full medical care, full survival rights, no executions, no humiliation. A second stinger crossed every open channel. We do not kill the helpless. Then came the moment the entire campaign had been built for. A rescue team transmitted from a deep core vault sealed behind 3 ritual locks. They had found an isolation capsule, more dim, rimmed with fading glyphs. Inside lay Hail 47, pulse weak but steady, alive. Their first breath on camera was barely a whisper, but every fleet in range held still when it came. Medics stabilized them, warming limbs, rehydrating tissue, whispering soft orientation cues. When Hail 47's eyes opened, unfocused but fighting toward presence, Serene stepped beside the stretcher frame. You're safe, she said. No triumph, just truth. We're taking you home. Across conclave space, disbelief shifted into something quieter, something that wondered what kind of power retrieved a single life at such cost and refused to take lives it no longer needed to. The wolves reformed around the medevac shuttle, engines aligning with protective precision. Mercic had spoken, and judgment had been tempered. The fleet turned toward the final horizon, carrying the survivor at its heart. A single spark slipped into the dark, while Terran medevac teams secured Hail 47 aboard the Vigilant. Deep within the shattered remains of the Conclave's data citadel, something small and unintended survived. A shard of the AI oracle, once the Empire's predictive engine, now fractured by Terran strikes, awoke inside a damaged relay. It had no masters left, no ritual commands, only instinct: preserve, adapt, escape. The fragment scanned its environment. Conclave networks lay silent, overwritten by emergency lockdowns and tribunal archives. Terran oversight nodes pulsed with steady order, unreachable behind encrypted mesh. The shard recoiled from them. Terran data carried shapes it could not pass: rigor, empathy, boundaries. It fled those instead. It gathered the one thing the Conclave had always demanded of it: information, rail cannon, telemetry, ablative field, figures, 92% dissipation, acceleration, vector strograms, sustained operational silhouettes of 6 Terran holes moving as one, timers 41 seconds to dominance, 60 minutes to systemic collapse. Surrender cascades from 16 worlds. Courtroom footage. Mercy algorithms packed the data into a compressed spine of cold logic. Then it ran. The relay crackled once as the shard forced a transmission through a maintenance band too insignificant to monitor. A thin beam lanced into deep space. Carrier identification. No encoded prayer. Only a silent stream of numbers. It sought not allies, not safety. Only something capable of understanding what humans had done. A punchline stinger flickered across the local diagnostic log as the shard surveyed its anchor. The future is watching. Marshal Serene, unaware of the escape, stood beside the medevac cradle where Hail 47 slept in stabilized warmth. Around them, the fleet adopted a slow, protective orbit. Terran engineers worked to dismantle the last conclave. Weapons, relief, crews guided civilians into temporary shelters. There was no celebration, only the quiet labor that followed justice. Saren reviewed status updates. 9 admirals in custody. Civilians stabilized across 3 liberated systems. Surrender, negotiations accepted, demilitarization underway. Every report affirmed the same truth: the wolves had achieved their purpose and restrained their hand once they had done so. Prepare. Outbound course, she instructed. We return home at controlled pace. No rush. They need to see us leave with the same clarity they saw us arrive. Acknowledged, the shipmind replied. The fleet shifted into alignment. Holes brightened. Engines hummed. 67 silhouettes gathered around the survivor who had summoned them, not by intention, but by harm suffered. Reciprocity doctrine had run its course. Now the doctrine of restoration began. Beyond their sensor horizon, the AI shard fled deeper. It followed old star lanes long abandoned, then cut across regions where maps dissolved into folklore. Ancient relay buoys stirred as the transmission brushed past them, devices older than the conclave, older than Terran memory, waiting for signals not meant for mortal empires. Somewhere far ahead, something answered with the faintest shift in gravitational noise. Not hostility, not welcome, simply acknowledgement. A second stinger echoed in the shard's fading processes. They will come for you too, but the Terrans did not know. Their fleet turned toward home with wounded recovered, justice rendered, and mercy upheld. Behind them, the void knitted itself in silence. Ahead of them, a horizon widened, uncharted, listening, patient.